We're live in 3, 2...
Welcome into Leather Brains episode 160. We have a full crew here today. Of course, I am your host, SlapDawg, and I am joined by Scotty Del Rey, Alan Casanova Castro, and the big man Yeti himself. Gentlemen, happy almost conclusion to the wildcard weekend.
We've
and
almost
congratulations.
Climaxed.
Did you climax, Yeti?
Yeah, almost. So we still have a game and a half to go. So
I'm edging.
Yeah,
I'm edging.
You're edging.
I'm shaking, but I'm not there yet.
Well, currently the Bills game is going on. I don't know if we should really define that as a game because it seems to be more of a blowout at this juncture.
21-10.
Okay, 10. 21-10.
21-10.
Touchdown right before.
It's narrowing.
Right half. But I don't expect the Steelers to win this game. I don't think the Steelers expect to win this game, and I don't think any of us had the Steelers winning this game. So
I will keep track of the 9.5 that the Bills are favored in most books. So that's what we're rooting for now. Okay. A backdoor cover.
Yeah, 9.5 point spread. I mean, I think that's the biggest spread out of all of the games for this wildcard weekend. So, not a good look. I had even went and tweeted, and it is astounding that the Steelers are here. If I'm being honest with you, the Steelers aren't a great team, but they made it to the playoffs, and it looks like they're probably going to conclude their playoff run here at the end.
Don't underestimate Josh Allen's ability to throw 5 interceptions in one half. Could happen.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't see it happening. They look too good. Yeah. So we'll provide updates for that game, but there's other things that we're going to discuss. So, of course, we have the coaching updates. There's games that have already happened that need some discussion. We have Brainbusters, so if anybody has questions, please go over to YouTube and ask your questions over there, and we will answer them. Actually, even for people on Twitter, I think they filter over now. So if you got any questions, hit us up. We will answer them at the end of the show. And then we're also going to be talking about the divisional round preview that is upcoming after this week of football. So let's kick things off with the coaching updates. Some of this is news and some of this is not. So bear with me. We're going to start out with Bill Belichick, Mr. Billiam himself. It is an end of an era, gentlemen. He is out at New England. Normally, I wouldn't really ask any questions to you guys about a coaching change because they come and they go. But I feel like this is a really, really this is a big narrative. I mean, Bill Belichick has been he is a historical NFL head coach, and for him to leave New England, they've already found their replacement. It's their linebackers coach, Jared Mayo. He is the new head coach and will be introduced tomorrow. On Wednesday. Today's Monday. I mean, was this the right move? I think it was. I think most NFL fans think this is the case, but is Bill Belichick going to end up somewhere else in your guys' thoughts? What do you think?
I think for me, what was most interesting about this 2-3 day window was just you had literally the probably greatest coach in college football history retire, and then you had, I mean, some would debate with or without Tom how that looks with Bill Belichick as being one of the greatest NFL coaches in history. And it's not often you get to say that about two sports where like there's like such seismic shifts. But I think from a Patriots perspective, it's been a few years of this. Ever since Tom left, you can kind of see this brewing where they couldn't get the quarterback situation settled. I think it makes sense. I think for Patriots fans, it makes sense. I would have liked to see Bill one more year. I'd like to see what they did with the draft first, because I think this is going to be tough on a first-year head coach, getting a top draft pick, no quarterback solidified. Like, I think from an organizational standpoint, I think New England maybe should have just waited just maybe a hair longer. But if Bill wanted out too, if he was tired of that shit, I totally get it as well. Sometimes, at work, you're just kind of over it.
And I had seen some reports that him and the GM, or not the GM, but the owner, Robert Kraft, there was a lot of turmoil behind the scenes and a lot of disagreements between both of those parties. So it sounds like it was kind of a mutual shaking of hands and moving on to a new era. Bill Belichick's not a young guy anymore. He's 72, 73, I think. He's up there, right? So do you think he goes and finds a new home in the NFL, or is his time in the NFL done?
I think Jerry Jones is already on his way to go pick up Bill Belichick. Obviously, Dallas doesn't have an opening yet, but I think the writing's on the wall there for Dallas to fire their coach as well. But one thing I want to talk about with Bill Belichick is something that I think is wild to kind of comprehend is that a lot of the rookies that are coming into the league now, they were born in like 2002, 2003. And Bill Belichick has been around for a long time. So some of these guys, they weren't, or they were barely born before Bill Belichick went on this run with Tom Brady. So it's like, I wonder how those guys feel about playing for Bill Belichick, but because he's probably so out of touch with those guys now. That's a huge gap in age. Like, I wouldn't want to play for Bill Belichick right now if I was a 21, 22-year-old guy. No. Sorry, man.
No, I understand what you're saying, and I tend to agree. I think some of his play or his coaching style can be dated. I think that might be, there might be some credence there, and it could be true. I think for me, you're looking at the entire scope of the situation, I just wish he would have went out in a really cool way. Like, I'm sure they'll have some sort of ceremony where he comes back to the Patriots and they, give him a sideline ovation. But like, if you just would have cleared the sideline, like, and I won't say this about many coaches, but if you just would have cleared the sidelines and let him just wave off at the fans and walk off alone, like, that would have been one of the coolest, most stoic ways for Bill Belichick, like, the thank you for what you've done for that organization, because he has. I mean, he has changed the Patriots forever. So would have been cool.
Do you think he is the greatest? Do you think he's the greatest coach of all time, or do you think it's Tom Brady? He's just a great defensive coach that just happened to have one of the greatest quarterbacks.
I think as far as coaches are concerned, in my opinion, I think all coaches benefit from having a generational talent like Tom Brady. And in some aspects, I think the same can be said for somebody like Andy Reid. And don't get me wrong, I think Andy Reid is a wonderful coach, but how much can we contribute Patrick Mahomes and the success that is Patrick Mahomes? I think more often than not, those go hand in hand. And I think Bill Belichick is somewhat of an example of that, where you've seen him decline a little bit in his abilities as a coach with Tom Brady not present. So I think they go hand in hand a lot more than people care to admit.
I agree. The Twitterverse definitely likes to point out that Bill Belichick wouldn't be the GOAT without Tom Brady. So it's always an interesting discussion. I think if I'm Bill Belichick, as soon as Tom left, I would have left. I just would have found somewhere else too. I just would have been like, all right, peace, I'm out. That was a good run, because I think it kind of tarnished his legacy just a smidge. And not that he gives a shit what four assholes on a pod are saying about him, but I think like the overall like kind of narrative of him is kind of like, oh, well, he kind of like shit the bed towards the end. And so it's like, it just kind of leaves a sour taste in your mouth, where if he walked away and maybe went to a totally different team, and I don't think anybody would have batted an eye if he tried to like resurrect some failing franchise. But I wish he would have just walked when Tom did.
Yeah, and another coach that has there have been somewhat of a mutual parting of ways, it seems, is Pete Carroll. I mean, another guy who's been with an organization for a while and changed an organization for the better. He is out at Seattle, and it's looking like the Cowboys defensive coordinator Dan Quinn is expected to be a top prospect per Adam Schefter. I'm just going to say this. Dan Quinn, I wouldn't want to play for him. He looks kind of scary. He looks like somebody who's going to be a no bullshit kind of guy. And just based on his physical appearance, I don't think I'd like to be coached by him. So I'm just going to throw that out there. It kind of scares me.
And he blew a Super Bowl lead.
And he blew a Super Bowl lead. Yeah, that's also fair. A really bad one. Yeah, so both of these guys are out. And then Mike Vrabel. This one was a shock. This one, I really am interested in your guys' thoughts and opinions here. I didn't really see this coming. I know the Titans have had somewhat of a mediocre last really 2 years now. But they've still found a way to be competitive. I have a lot of respect for Mike Vrabel, and the Titans have fired him. So I have no doubt in my mind Vrabel will find a new head coaching gig. But were you guys surprised to hear that news?
I wasn't surprised to hear it. There were kind of rumblings from the beginning of the season that, obviously the Titans have struggled to get over that. They've been competitive, but they've kind of struggled to overcome that mediocrity to a degree. And Vrabel has kind of suggested that he's also frustrated with the situation and with the organization. So I think even though he was fired, I think Vrabel was expecting to leave after this season one way or another.
I think after they got rid of AJ Brown, I think that was it. Because there's that clip on that circulates when they traded him and he walks away like, the fuck is this? I think at that point that was the unraveling of that relationship. I think he's trying to make good with whatever was there, but I think it was over. I think that relationship was definitely strained at that point in time. And so I'm not surprised that he's gone. I'm more interested to see where the hell he's going to go because I think he's really good. He's definitely a player's coach. He got Tennessee to I don't know how many playoff appearances where you're like, who the fuck? Like Ryan Tannehill is out here looking serviceable. I'm interested to see which organization's now going to want to lean into that a little more. I guess which organization do you feel like should lean into that a little more that currently has some of these vacancies?
I think go ahead, Yeti.
I'll take this one. And I'm going to say the Cowboys.
I agree.
And I know the Cowboys don't have a vacancy yet, but if you look at that team, they're just missing an identity. And if you throw somebody in there like Mike Vrabel, who will get on his players' asses and get them in check, I think that team is, they're going to be a physical, aggressive team that's going to want to play for him. Whereas you have a guy like Mike McCarthy, who's not we don't really know what this team is supposed to be, the identity of this team. And we saw that last night, obviously.
Yeah, the Cowboys have been missing for so long just a chip on their shoulder. They've always been overrated, and they're America's team and this and that, and they're always, people are talking about how they're Super Bowl contenders, seems like every year. And so it just feels like they're not going into these key matchups with the chip on their shoulder. And if one person can bring that, it's Mike Vrabel. So I think that would be a great addition for that organization.
I like him in Seattle. I think Seattle would be a really good landing spot for him. Seattle has had an identity, and it would be it was Pete Carroll and what he had done there. And while there's some question marks at the quarterback position, of course, I think Vrabel, that would be a good fit for him. Like based on his coaching style and the players that the Seahawks do have, I like that as a fit. But we'll see. There are other coaching changes that have happened, and I'm going to fire them off real quick. And if you guys want to stop at any of them, please stop me at any time. Washington Commanders, they have fired Ron Rivera. We knew that, but there are several rumors, but no concrete intel on top prospects to currently replace him. Eric Bieniemy is absent from reports, and that to me is a little surprising that they haven't come out and said they at the very least want to give him an interview. I think that is more than warranted at this point, but as of yet, Eric Bieniemy's name has been pretty quiet on the Commanders' front. Atlanta Falcons, they fired Arthur Smith, and thank God. There are several rumors, but no concrete intel on who would replace him at this juncture. The Chargers, they fired Brandon Staley, as is no surprise to Chargers fans or anybody that is a fan of the NFL. Jim Harbaugh was in LA today to meet with Chargers per Tom Pelissero. Raiders defensive coordinator Patrick Graham and Ravens defensive coordinator Mike McDonald are all candidates in that. They've also completed interviews from 49ers defensive coordinator Steve Wilks and Ravens OC Todd Monken. Chargers ain't fucking around. I mean, they've had a lot of time to try and figure out who their candidates should be, so I think they've got a war board, so to speak, of who their next head coach should be, and they're wasting no time with these interviews. So. And then Carolina Panthers, they fired Frank Reich. We all knew that as well. Panthers have stated they are planning on conducting 12 interviews to fill the role, including 2 in-house candidates, which would be Chris Tabor, who's been their interim head coach, as well as their defensive coordinator. I can't even pronounce this. Can one of you pronounce this for me? You guys know
Ivero.
Okay, we're gonna call him Mr. Ivero.
You just gotta say it fast and confidently.
I'm not confident in
just
my
roll the
ability to
R's.
say
It'll sound like you're saying it perfect.
And then Vegas, they fired Josh McDaniels. So congratulations there, Yeti. We knew that has happened.
Thank you. Feels good.
Interim head coach Antonio Pierce is rumored to be among the top prospects, but other fun rumors are circulating, including Jim Harbaugh as well as John Gruden. I want to stop here before we kind of break down this Houston Browns game. What do you think about this, Yeti? Because Antonio Pierce, he has completely changed the Raiders organization since the departure of Josh McDaniels, and that team looks like a completely different team than when they were playing for Josh McDaniels. Antonio Pierce has garnered some interest with some other NFL teams as well as a potential head coaching option. So you want to see him stay home with the Raiders? Are you okay with him departing for a different pasture? Or what are your thoughts on this whole thing?
It's very interesting because if he would have asked me before all these coaches got fired and all the carousel happenings that are going on right now, I would have said yes, 100%. And the reason why is because Antonio Pierce just seems like an old school Oakland Raider guy. You know, he's a bad boy who comes in with this mentality of, I'm going to bring in a bunch of misfits. We're going to fuck up the league. I don't care how they act. We're just going to go out there, play physical, play fast, play aggressive football like the Oakland Raiders used to back in the day. But with all these firings that have happened and all these head coaches that are available, notably Mike Vrabel, Jim Harbaugh, who's been rumored to, the Raiders and the Chargers now, it makes me a little more interested in those guys over Antonio Pierce. So I think you have to, if I'm Mark Davis, which he doesn't have many brain cells left, but if he has a few left, I think you have to try to swing for those two guys. If it doesn't work out, Antonio Pierce is your guy because the team did come around towards the end of the season.
Yeah.
Question, Yeti, as a follow-up. What if not bringing back Antonio Pierce costs you Max Crosby? Because he said, if you don't hire Antonio Pierce, I'm leaving, which I feel like is such a childish thing to do. Like,
I agree.
I get you had a good end of the year with him. I think he was a great players coach. I think Antonio Pierce was what that team needed to end this year to like keep people together. But I don't know if that's the future for the Raiders. Like, I don't know what more he gives you other than what he gave you. Like, so is it worth it to lose Max Crosby to get somebody other than Antonio Pierce? Would you say yes or no?
God, I wanted to say, yeah, that's
okay.
That's a tough question.
I give you Jim Harbaugh, but you lose Max Crosby. Would you take it?
No,
you wouldn't take it.
I would not take that.
Would you take Mike Vrabel? If you would get Mike Vrabel, but you lose Matt Crosby, would you take it?
Oh, no. So no.
What if I think Belichick is like, I want to cash in some of these checks?
Okay. Bill. Instant no. Easy no.
Is there any current NFL head coach or fired head coach that you would take in Vegas to get rid of Max Crosby? Or are you just saying, I don't want to get rid of Max?
Arthur Smith.
Andy Reid?
Yeah, I'll take Andy Reid off your hands or Mike Tomlin.
Could I interest you in John Gannon?
To lose.
You know what's interesting is, I don't know how true this is, but I saw rumors flying around that if Antonio Pierce is held or retained as head coach, Cliff Kingsbury is rumored as the offensive coordinator that he wants to bring in. I don't know if that's confirmed, but that would be interesting.
I have a lot of respect for Cliff, especially after he left the Cardinals and like looking at that organization and kind of everything that had gone on. I think he was a little in over his head, but I think he still is a good offensive-minded coach. And to get him as an OC is not I would be excited about that.
Going back really quick, staying in the division, but the Chargers. I think this one's really interesting. And you were in a run, so I didn't want to stop you. But you look at those are a lot of defensive guys that they're bringing in to interview. I think that's super interesting. Depending on how you view Herbert, like I would assume based on how it went firing Staley. And he's supposed to be a defensive guy, that they would lean in and try to go get somebody all offense and just be like, you know what, let's just capitalize on Herbert and what we have. I think it's an interesting choice to look at all these ground and pound kind of defensive guys that aren't really what you see. So I don't know how they're viewing Herbert, or is it really just kind of protecting him with the defense? But that was the only thing that really stood out to me. It was like who they're interviewing. They seem to be straying away from going from like some gung-ho offensive guy.
It almost suggests that maybe Kellen Moore's planning on staying there, and they're confident in that, and they know that they have a good offensive mind on staff, so they're comfortable focusing more on their defensive problems.
That's a good point.
That is a good point, and Kellen Moore has been kind of touted as another potential head coaching candidate, but it's gone a little quiet on that front recently. So maybe that is the case. Maybe he does stay with the Chargers, and that could lend some of the credence as to why they are looking for a defensive guy. But I would think that. I was in Allen's camp until you brought that up, Scotty. You would think you would want somebody to come in and maximize this offense because it has looked. This year was a wonderful example of it struggled. The Chargers' offense was terrible. The Chargers in entirety were terrible, but their offense should have been good given all the personnel and the talent that they had. So I would have thought they would have kind of swung for that. But let's pivot over to the weekend games here. Let's talk about Houston for a little bit. Scotty, I'll let you take the reins with this one.
Yeah, I'm just going to give it right back to you, Hunter, because we'll talk a little bit about the details of this game, but I just got to ask, 2 weeks in a row, man, you've doubted C.J. Stroud and the Texans, and I gotta think that, you know, as a former Texans fan, there's maybe a little bit of wanting them to fail in there, but you've bet against them the last 2 weeks. I just want to get your thoughts on this.
No. I think you are probably correct. I'm a former Texans fan, and the reason I left the Texans was because of, I would say, largely J.J. Watt. He was my favorite NFL player. He was with the Texans. He went to the Cardinals, and so I followed him there to the end of the career. The really shitty thing is now the Texans are good. The Texans are really good, and I have left the Texans to go support a mediocre, sad, terrible franchise. So part of it is that, I think, for sure, is I will always root for the Texans, I think. I will always be a Texans. They will have a special place in my heart, and I will always be a fan of theirs. I just didn't want it to be too early. And like that's where I look at the Texans team at now, is I just don't want them to be too early. But at this juncture, I have to just be happy for them and excited for them, and I just want them to keep going. Like if the Texans go to the Super Bowl, I'm going to be one happy motherfucker. But I also I want them to continue to have success, and so I just don't want them to find it too early and then they gas out for the next 2 to 3 years. And I don't know if that makes sense or if that's fair to say, but that's kind of my mentality towards the whole thing. Is I don't think they're there yet, but I think they're trending in that direction. Learn from the experience in the playoffs, and then let's go kill it again next year. And I think CJ Stroud certainly has the potential to do that.
Do you wish you were still a Texans fan?
Yeah, probably a little bit. Admittedly,
I think of you all the time. I assume you still have like a little soft spot, and I think
I do. I mean,
all
here,
of us
also, look at this.
I think we'd be okay if you said, yeah.
I mean,
I
this
think
is still
we would
sitting
all.
on my mantle.
Would everybody be okay? Like, would the three of us sitting here looking at Hunter be okay if he's like, you know what? I'm still kind of a Texas fan. Like, I still like them. Like, I don't
think they'd let me.
No.
Oh, you don't think so?
We would definitely give you shit, but it's understandable because I think all of us here are kind of Texans fans, just seeing what that team's been able to do in such a short period of time. And just from a football fan perspective, I think everybody's kind of a Texans fan right now. But if Hunter did that, I would give him shit relentlessly forever.
See, yeah, and that's why I can't.
Who has 3 football teams? He has the Cardinals, the Texans, and the Lions. Like
Lions are not my football team. See, that's the difference.
He just likes Dan Campbell.
I just like Dan Campbell.
Okay.
Well, and also it's kind of a unique thing. A lot of people maybe listening live in an area where they are in close proximity to a football team. And being born and raised in the state of Nebraska, you got all sorts of options, and many people just choose one and just send it. And that's kind of what Hunter did, which is understandable.
That's true.
That is what happened. But like, here's the thing too: is like I wouldn't root for the Lions if Dan Campbell wasn't there. Like I would not be as excited for the Lions if it wasn't for Dan Campbell. So like if the Lions were to fire Dan Campbell tomorrow and he were to go find a new team, there would be a few teams I would never root for regardless of who their head coach is. But for the most part, I'm pretty open as far as like I like you or I don't, and I like Dan Campbell, so I would like whatever team he went for.
Yeti, you get Dan Campbell, but you lose Max Crosby.
No. I'd be rooting for the Raiders.
Okay.
You'd get one fan over here.
Oh God, no.
So you gain Dan Campbell, you gain Hunter, but you lose Max Crosby.
Easy no.
Okay.
Are you serious?
I already have Hunter in my back pocket, so we're good.
That's what you think. That's what you.
All right, fair.
To wrap that up, I am sad. I'm happy for the Texans because they are a good team and they're fun to watch right now. And I'm happy that they found success given the Deshaun Watson situation and how quickly they were able to flip that, get that out of the way. They looked like they were going to be a bottom of the barrel team, and they've come out and proven that they are anything but that. So I was really happy with them winning. I think to answer your question, Scotty, though, I have been kind of rooting against them because I just don't want it to happen yet.
Fair enough. Yeti, why don't you actually talk about this game a little bit so we can get into what happened?
Obviously, Houston, they're the talk of the town right now, but I think we need to talk about Cleveland for a little bit and just their defensive woes that they've had all season. So at home, there's no denying that this team was one of the best defensive teams in the history of the NFL. They went 8-1 at home. They averaged just under 14 points allowed per game. and under 240 yards per game, which is pretty, those numbers are amazing in the modern NFL. But you get them away from Cleveland, and my God, it's a completely different story. They're 3-5 on the road. They average nearly 30 points per game allowed and over 340 yards allowed per game. So it's almost like we should have seen this coming. I think a lot of the media, we might have gotten caught up in Joe Flacco and the allure of Joe Flacco going on the road a few weeks ago against Houston, putting up stupid numbers with Amari Cooper and thinking, okay, Cleveland's going to do that again. But CJ Stroud didn't play in that game, and a couple of their defensive stars were out in that game. So now we actually got to see what would happen with a fully healthy Houston squad, and they laid it on Cleveland.
Almost fully. They're still missing some offensive weapons. I think they were almost fully.
Yep.
I think this is surprising to me because generally the rule of thumb is that defense is portable. Like defense is the thing that you can take with you in the playoffs. Like if you're a dome team and you have a great offense, and you have to go play on the road. Generally, you have a fall off. But from a defensive standpoint, I think that this Houston offensive line was severely underestimated, how they could hold up. I think Laramie Tunsil did a great job blocking Garrett. I think he kept him at bay. I don't think there was like any impact. The Flacco pick six for me was the thing that really just that tilted it. Cause then it was kind of like, all right, they were going back and forth. They were keeping it close. Flacco's kind of driving. And then I think that pick six was kind of like completely deflated that whole offensive side. And they never recovered from that, which you could point back to coaching, like, there's still a lot of game left. But to me, that was the turning point. But I am surprised that Cleveland was able to give up that many. But maybe not. CJ Stroud, up and coming. I think he's going to be the next thing for this league. So maybe we'll look back on this as like, yeah, should have seen that coming. He's one of the greatest quarterbacks of this generation.
Yeah, and you bring up Joe Flacco, who Cleveland, they brought in to be their date for Thanksgiving, their Christmas date, their New Year's Eve kiss, just a little holiday fling action. He goes 4-2 as a starter there, almost 2,000 passing yards, 14 TDs, 10 picks, and he brings Amari Cooper and David Njoku to life for fantasy owners. So we know that this fling with Joe Flacco has probably come to an end. After the game on Saturday, he said, I don't know how much longer I want to play football. So that leaves us
for like 60 years.
Yeah, right. So now that leaves us with the question of what does the future of Cleveland look like? Because we've seen what this offense can look like with a gunslinger, dare I say, in Joe Flacco. But this offense didn't look as great with Deshaun Watson, who he's on a huge contract. So what are we doing with Cleveland now?
I think you got to give them a little bit of a pass with the underperforming prior to Joe Flacco coming on board, just because of all the injuries that they had, namely Nick Chubb. You built this offense around Nick Chubb being able to establish that ground game and then being able to run play action and bootlegs and use Watson's mobility off of that. And losing such a key player is going to change everything. So you expect a little bit of issues there. So for me personally, and I think Brown fans hopefully feel the same way, is, you guys had a great season with all the adversity that you faced. And this team, there's a lot of good things to be excited about. I think this is another year where you got to say, Deshaun Watson, you got to come in and prove it. We paid you this much money. You got to come in and prove it. But as of right now, I'd still feel pretty optimistic as a Browns fan.
Yeah, you did this with Joe Flacco. Like, let's not sit here and pretend that Joe Flacco is a top tier upper echelon quarterback. Maybe years ago he was in the conversation, but I mean, he is an old, dare I say, washed up veteran who came in and carried this Browns team to a playoff run, and it ended this week. But I still like to think that Deshaun Watson, when healthy, should be a better quarterback than Joe Flacco. The question at hand is, will he be? I'm starting to lean towards probably not, because now he's gotten hurt again, or he's gotten hurt, and he missed half the year with his shoulder injury now. He didn't play the last 2 seasons of the NFL, so like he's played half a season of football in the last 3 years. That's problematic to me. Like the alarm bells are starting to kind of go off in my head if I'm a Browns fan. And the reality is you're stuck with this guy because you're paying him so much money, and they're not going to Russell Wilson him out of there. They're going to continue to use him. I think you just have to hope and pray that he is what he was when he was with the Texans, and it's starting to look like it could be a far cry from that.
Yeah, I agree. I also think with Flacco coming in and doing what he did, you have a blueprint of like what could happen kind of with this offense. And if he doesn't even live up to that low benchmark of what, no offense to Joe, like if he can't even live up to that, it's going to be such a terrible look for that front office. Cause now they're like, we did better when we brought in Joe Flacco, who's retiring, more so than we have with Deshaun Watson, who we're paying this an exorbitant amount of money to. And it's going to create a lot of cap problems for him. It's just not a great look. Like, it was cool they made the playoffs, but now it's almost like you almost wish you didn't if you're a Browns fan or a Browns front office, because you're like, damn, now we're like, that's our benchmark, is with a beat up team in Joe Flacco, we can make the playoffs. But with a healthy Deshaun Watson, what's our ceiling?
And let's not take anything away from this beat up team, because you really have to give your kudos out to Kevin Stefanski and what he has been able to do with this beat up team. So I think if anything, this proves that, you know, Cleveland has kind of been a roller coaster the last couple years, where they've been good, they've been bad. They've had the Baker Mayfield era, and then they moved on from that, and now they have this situation. I think this is kind of indicative that Kevin Stefanski should be a long-term solution for you, because I would imagine that there was some question marks around him and what his future looked like with the Browns if this Watson thing didn't work out. I think this is a really good indication that Kevin Stefanski is a pretty good head coach if you're taking this beat-up team of second-string offense and you're carrying them this far. So, and let's also give a shout-out to Cleveland's defense, because they are one of the top-tier elite defenses in the league, and they definitely have their fair share of the reason why Cleveland made it this far.
Just not on the road.
Just not on the road, as you gave your stats for. So we want to move over to the talk of the town here, Kansas City versus Miami.
Yeah, I'll take it away here as the local Chiefs fan here. Just kidding, guys. So let's be honest. Nobody really wanted to play in this game, right? I mean, Kansas City, they showed up, they won, but my God, if you told me you wanted to play
$50,
negative
to get into that game,
degree weather, you're crazy.
I think you should. I think it should have been free for any Chiefs fans that wanted to come to that game.
I have a couple of good friends that are season ticket holders. They didn't even go. They're like, this is not worth it. They're like, this is so fucking cold. Like, there's no way, like, to even enjoy yourself. I did have on a separate text thread, I have a couple of Dolphins fans, and I told them, I said, if the ticket price goes below what a monthly subscription for Peacock is, you have to go. And they're like, okay. So they were watching the ticket prices, and it never crept down to that point. But like, that was our go, no go. If it crept below the Peacock subscription price, they had to go watch the game.
And there was a guy that was shirtless, like he was taking his shirt off, and I'm like, here's the thing, man. Like, and this goes for any NFL fans. If you want to go to the game and you want to root for your team, I'm there for it. But if you're gonna take your shirt off in negative 30-degree weather, you're a fucking psycho, and you don't need to be going out in the game and getting frostbite on your titties. It just doesn't need to happen.
That's the thing, is like, when people do that all the time and people call them crazy when it's like 20 degrees, and then it's like, okay, you know, it's still crazy, but it's more understandable. Like, this is like legitimately dangerous weather. Like, I feel like those people are going to have scars from frostbite. Yeah, no, that's a lot of Busch Light they're consuming down there. I
was going to say, speaking of Busch Light, probably the most interesting part of the game was, if you're on Twitter, if you just search Arrowhead beer, there's pictures of all the beers exploding because of the temperature. I think that's like, that, to me, that was the worst part of the game. Could you imagine spending like $25 for a beer, going to sit down, and then it explodes? So you didn't get to drink any of it. You basically just got to treat it like a lollipop and hope it gets you drunk at that point, because you can't do anything. Like,
and then you're soaking wet the rest of the game.
There's a video of one of the concession stand employees pulling out a bottle of Smart Water, and they pull it out of the fridge, and they're videotaping it, and it's liquid when it's in the fridge, and as they pull it out, you literally see the bottle change to ice as they are holding it in their hand, and it's like, that's when you know. Put a fucking shirt on, okay? Put your damn shirts on. I'm there, I get it, but
I've been to a game that's cold. I don't know if you guys have been to games that are that cold. I think going to games in general, it's always an interesting mindset, because it's cool before and during, and then as soon as the game's done, you're like, get me the fuck out of here. Like, I don't want to be out here anymore. I don't care anymore. I'm over it.
People.
Like, I could have been watching this at the comfort of my own home, drinking my own beer.
Yeah, when you're at home, you just change the channel, or you go take a piss, or like you fire up Rocket League, or whatever the hell it is you want to do. Like, but when you're there, you're like, now I got to shuffle out. I can't feel my feet. Everything's exploding around me.
But you won the
Like,
game. But you won the game.
I wouldn't even have cared. I've been like, this blows.
Thankfully my team was smart enough to make a dome, so
thankfully my team was smart enough not to make the playoffs, so we didn't have to worry about it.
Enough.
That's a good call.
Yeah.
All right, let's get the wheels back on the wagon here, guys. Scotty, Allen, I think we need to have a discussion about Rashee Rice, because man, this rookie is looking like a veteran for the Kansas City Chiefs. On Saturday night, he had 8 catches, 130 receiving yards, and a touchdown. But not only that, but his numbers on the season were impressive for a rookie. 102 targets, 938 receiving yards, 7 touchdowns. And he did all this with a low average depth of target of 5 yards.
Jeez.
He was mainly just a yard after the catch guy. And in fact, he had tied for most yak yards with Amon-Ra St. Brown at 732 yards. So my question to you guys is Rashee Rice legit? Is he the future of the Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver room?
It sure seems like we don't have any other options, so I'll gladly take him, given the state of our wide receiver room throughout this season. So yes, I'm very excited that when he started the season, he was dealing with some of the same drops that a lot of the other receivers were, but ultimately we always saw the potential in him. And in fact, on this podcast, we talked about how with all the drop problems that they're having, the game plan number 1 needs to be Pacheco, and number 1A needs to be give the ball to Rashee Rice in space. And if you do those things, we can make plays happen. And it seems like they really caught on to that throughout the season, and especially here toward the end. So I'm excited, and I think he's becoming a guy, especially as Travis Kelce this season seems to be declining. You got to make him the focal point of the passing attack.
Yeah, I agree. I think Rice, you could see it clicking as the year went on. I think when it became blatantly obvious that MVS and Sky Moore were just not going to do it, I think you saw Reed and Nagy focus on getting him the ball more, which has really helped his totals. So those year-long totals are actually kind of like interesting, because he didn't become a focus until the latter half of the year. And then you saw it even more in the Bengals game, where he had 127 yards receiving, 5 catches. Like, he made a play, and we could probably clip it and come back to it, but he made a play where even afterwards Mahomes said that wasn't the play design, but he realized there was no safety over top, did a double move and we just went for it. And I think that's the evolution of this, is when you're starting to get to that Kelce level of like, we're just doing shit unscripted. That's when it becomes even more dangerous. And I think he's leaning into that. And I think if you're going to own him in any fantasy capacities, or if you're looking at dynasty or looking at redraft next year, I think it's an interesting kind of like middle round play of like, this could develop into something. And then certainly from a dynasty perspective, as they don't have anybody else right now, you're kind of keeping your eye on the offseason to say, like, are they going to sign someone like a T. Higgins, or are they going to bring in like a Mike Evans? But I mean, he certainly looks like the guy that can be physical and get you all the way to the crib.
I still think the Chiefs should. Here's my concern with Rashee Rice. Look, this young rookie, he's a talented wide receiver. I don't think he's a true wide receiver 1. I think part of Rice's success could be maybe partially attributed to Travis Kelce and the fact that he is still drawing a lot of attention in 100%. That offense. And so 100%. I still think you need another weapon. It could Rashee Rice be a low-end wide receiver 1? Sure. But I don't think he is talented enough to garner the respect of a defense as the entire wide receiver, like not like a Jamar Chase or a Justin Jefferson, I guess is kind of where I'm going with it. And obviously that's not who he is, but he needs some additional help in that offense to help him get open and not be the entire focus of the defense. So
yeah, I don't think there's anyone that saw the Chiefs play this season that thought they don't need to add any more weapons. Rashee Rice has got it.
Sure.
I think we're all on the same page on that front.
Yeah. And
you know what's interesting about Rice is you look at his route tree, and all the success that he's having are coming on slants or in-cutting routes. Like, it's not like he's running vertical routes and getting mass yards at a time. It's just these easy 4 to 10 yard dump passes that he's cribbing, or he's taken for 15 yards after the catch. So I kind of think if the Kansas City Chiefs get a wide receiver in free agency, and they will, they need to look at somebody that's like a vertical threat. Somebody who can really take the top off of defense. And I don't know if T. Higgins is that guy. I know Mike Evans is a free agent, and he is kind of up there. but I think Mike Evans can be that vertical wide receiver one that really complements Rashee Rice if Kelsey were to leave as well.
I also like the term cribbing. That's nice. I think we should start saying that a lot more often.
Yeah.
He's taking cribbing.
I want to keep talking about the wide receivers for a second because, as I've alluded to just seconds ago, the drops have been a real issue. And for some reason, the Chiefs decided to remember how to secure the ball in negative 30-degree weather. So I just wanted to run a couple ideas. Maybe they require freezing hands in order to catch the ball. So I think maybe we get some buckets of ice water or something on the sidelines to start next season, and they hold them in there during every possession, or maybe even we replace our locker room with a giant meat locker freezer, so that way in between possessions they can run in there and just freeze for a while. Because I genuinely was very surprised to see how well these receivers were able to secure the ball, especially given the circumstances. And I was pleasantly surprised, but it's just baffling.
My only gripe from that game as a Chiefs fan is McCole Hardman bailed on 3 deep passes that would have been. He did not want to be there, dude. He did not want to be there at all. If he would have caught those, this game could have been 40-7, easy. It should have been 40-7. I think the thing that is taking away from the Chiefs right now is their red zone offense, which we've talked about in chat, where since Bieniemy's gone, they've slid all the way to the back half of the league in red zone touchdown conversions. And that's where this is going to hurt them. And if they have to go on the road and play Buffalo, it's you're not going to win. You're not going to beat Josh Allen by kicking field goals. You're going to be able to beat a lot of teams by kicking field goals. They got to figure this shit out. And the thing for me was Hardman not selling out on those was there's your vertical threat, but he doesn't even want to catch it. So what's the freaking point?
Well, and I also want to, this game reinvigorated my love for Patrick Mahomes, because obviously this offense has been very disappointing all season long. And, a lot of that is not Patrick Mahomes' fault, as we've discussed with the drops, but it basically has humanized him to a degree to say, hey, maybe this guy can't just put the team on his back and win every game no matter what. So now that they've won again in the postseason, I just wanted to bring this up. Patrick Mahomes has more playoff wins than Troy Aikman, who had 11 playoff wins in 12 seasons, and he's tied for playoff wins with Aaron Rodgers, who had 12 playoff wins in 16 seasons as a starter, and he did all of that in only 6 seasons as a starter. If he gets 5 more playoff wins, which seems like it's inevitable, over the course of at least a few years, you're talking about Patrick Mahomes being launched from the 10th all-time to the 2nd all-time in terms of playoff wins in less than 10 years, and he'll be second only behind Tom Brady. Rodgers, Flacco, and Russ are the only 3 people in the top 25 of that metric that are still playing. So nobody else is even competing with Patrick Mahomes on this front. He really is one of, if not the greatest quarterback we've ever seen, and I'm just so happy he's a Chief.
And as a Raiders fan, it just hurts to hear that.
Yeah, I'm glad I'm really far away from this. But I'm going to say this. I said this in our group chat when the Chiefs won. This felt like a really good win for the Chiefs. That's how, as somebody who's not a Chiefs fan, and I know I was catching some heat on this over on Twitter, but I'm happy for you guys. This felt like a really good win for the Chiefs. And I think more than anything else, this really proved what the Dolphins are. And that's the F word, frauds. That's what the Dolphins have really been all season, and that we saw that come to fruition in that game. So it was. Let's flip the script a little bit. Let's talk about the Dolphins side of things.
I'm done talking about Kansas City for a little bit. We need to go to Miami, guys. I'm sorry, but I know we've flirted with the idea of calling Miami fraudulent, and I think we can, in fact, say they are fraudulent. They weren't anywhere near a legit. God, I can't talk. They just get me so worked up. Yeah,
we're doing a podcast.
Spit it out, bro.
Yeah. blah 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 blah. But Miami is not a legit team at all. And if we look at the stats on the season, Miami, they were 10-1 against teams that did not make the playoffs. They averaged 35 points per game, over 440 yards per game. But when they went up against teams that were legit, they were 1-6. They had 16 points per game and 316 yards per game. Yikes. And in the last 4 games of the season, they combined for a whopping 62 points against Dallas, against Baltimore, against Buffalo, and Kansas City. This was a team that damn near set the scoring record against the Denver Broncos, and they could only come up with 62 points in the last 4 games. Now, there's a lot of a lot of controversy if this is a Mike McDaniel problem, if this is a Tua problem. And while the weather was far from ideal in this game, obviously, if Tua is going to want to succeed in this league, he's going to have to go on the road and play in cold weather games, especially when we're talking about teams like Baltimore, Kansas City, Cincinnati, Buffalo, all being legitimate teams that you're going to have to go on the road and face in the playoffs. Tua in those games, in cold weather games, he's 0-6, and he only has 7 passing touchdowns for 12 picks. So what do you guys think about Tua? Like, is this a Tua problem? Is this a Mike McDaniel problem? Is it both?
I'm glad that you asked this question because I have been really sincerely struggling to try and figure that answer out myself, especially after watching this game. And then some news broke today that was really interesting. It kind of caught me off guard. The GM for the Dolphins, Chris Greer, has said that the goal is to have Tua with the Dolphins as a long-term solution at the quarterback position. I think you're capped. I think that's kind of the conclusion that I've come to is I get both. There's a lot of talk about both those things that you just mentioned. Is it Mike McDaniel or is it Tua? I think it's Tua. I don't know where the Dolphins organization goes from here, right? Because on paper, this team is electric. They have an NFL team that could win a race against track athletes at the Olympics. Like they are so fast, and not only that, but they're also very talented. McDaniels, you think about it, and I kind of rationalize it this way. Tua was on his way out before Mike McDaniels got there. I mean, that is the truth. Tua was looked at as a mediocre quarterback. He was not going to be the future for the Dolphins, and what changed there? Mike McDaniels came in, and then Mike McDaniels kind of revitalized Tua in a lot of different ways. And so it got me kind of thinking, why? What happened here for this to happen? Last season, Tua had a brain scramble and was out he was in and out of games for a large majority of the last season. So I think we kind of gave Tua a little bit of a pass there, and we didn't really get to fully see what he was with Mike McDaniels there. We saw glimpses of greatness, and we got excited about that. And we're like, he could potentially be the guy. So we kind of bought into that narrative. We have now seen him without brain scramble for an entire season playing with Mike McDaniels. And I think Mike McDaniels surely carries some of the blame in this whole thing, but I think much like what Mike McDaniels did when he was with the 49ers, he's getting the best out of his quarterback situation. You look at somebody like Jimmy Garoppolo. Could be kind of a similar situation where he's got all this talent around him and he's just trying to squeeze the best that he can out of Tua. I think Tua is part of the problem. I don't think Tua is part of the solution. I don't think Tua is a long-term quarterback in the NFL, but I think given the landscape of where the quarterback situation is at and where the Dolphins are as far as their future, I think they're kind of going to have to come to some sort of agreement, and they're going to have to. I mean, obviously, their GM kind of feels that way, but yeah. I think it's kind of Tua. I think Tua is going to kind of cap their abilities. He doesn't have that it factor like someone like Mahomes or Josh Allen does. He's just a guy. He's a jag. That's what he is, and Mike McDaniel's trying to get the best out of him, and that's the conclusion I've came to. So I welcome anybody's thoughts and opinions on that because I don't know if I'm.
No, I agree. I think if you go back to the draft in which they grabbed Tua, they could have had Herbert. And you kind of go back and you're like, if we could have redone that one, we probably would have went a different direction. I think what it comes down to is one freaking shocker that the guy from Hawaii that played college in Alabama and now plays professionally in Miami struggled to play in cold weather. Like that dude's never even lived in cold weather for like 1 second. And I know if you live in the Midwest right now, it is currently -30. We're all freezing our asses off. And like, if you don't know how to handle yourself in that, it's going to be a big, big problem. And on top of that, I think the people were already doubting his arm strength. I think, sure, he can throw it deep and he can throw a couple of good ones if he really needs to. But even watching that game, and I know Mahomes is Mahomes, but you saw one quarterback with it being freezing who's from Texas, went to Texas Tech. Sure, he plays professionally in Kansas City, but it's not like he's, freaking Eskimo just living in it all the time. Like, you got to figure it out. And I think he had arm strength, hand strength to be able to get it done and like be able to push the ball down the field. But from this Miami team, it's interesting from a Mike McDaniel's perspective. Like, was he limited in his play calling because of Tua's inability to push the ball down the field? Or is McDaniel's just an idiot and only calling screens and swing passes to try to like get the ball out of his hands as quickly as he could. And I don't know how to reconcile that. I think it's one feeds the other. I think we were just talking about Stefanski and how he was able to rally a team behind Joe Flacco coming in last minute. And then you have McDaniel's, where I think McDaniel's has a good script in his head of how he wants us to go. And I think he has the tools to be able to get it done. But I don't think he's able to reconcile for the deficiencies that Tua has. I think he has what he has. I think he needs a good quarterback to make everything click for him. And I don't think he's such a good coach that he can just be like, oh, I'm just going to Mike Tomlin my way to the playoffs. Like, things have to work right for him. He has to have a stacked deck, I feel like, for things to work in his favor. And Tua is not going to give him that. And the fact that the GM is saying, we're just going to roll with Tua, if I'm Mike McDaniels, I'm like, fuck. Like, I don't know how to do this then, because he's not able to push the ball like I want. I think the glaring deficiency from this game was their inability to run. They didn't, like, Mostert wasn't working, and they're like, all right, screw it, let's just abandon it. And A-Chain wasn't working, like, all right, let's just screw it. They just didn't want to be there. It was freezing. I was watching clips on my phone because I didn't even actually watch the game. And I was like, I don't even want to be there. I'm not watching next week either. Shocker.
Wow.
So, but yeah, that's
fan.
where it is for me. That's where it is for me with Tua.
I gotta say that
Dolphins fans aren't watching either. Sorry, Scotty. I just want to let you know.
Yeah,
Dolphins fans won't be watching.
Mike McDaniels and Hunter, you brought this up when Hard Knocks first came out, in-season Hard Knocks with the Dolphins, that Mike McDaniels maybe doesn't. We all saw him from the outside as kind of this goofy, lovable guy that everybody liked. And when you watch him interact with the team throughout the entire course of Hard Knocks, which I know that maybe that's a little cliche to bring that up, but you do sort of get an inside scoop about the relationship of this team. And even I'm sitting there with my wife watching Hard Knocks, who she doesn't care anything about football. And she's like, when is this guy going to stop talking? He is like the most annoying, least motivational person who's ever lived. And I do think that Mike McDaniels has a great knowledge of the game of football. But I think he's all playbook and no oomph. You know, I've often criticized Dan Campbell, as you know, for being all oomph and no brains. And I think Mike McDaniel is the exact opposite of that problem. And he's not able to get these guys motivated. When he speaks, you almost think they're just like counting down the seconds to when he's done talking. And I do think that makes a big impact, especially on a team that's from a fair weather state. When they have to go play a hard-nosed game of football, it's hard to get them motivated. And I think we saw that this week, and we've seen it several times this season.
I think what you I'm glad you said that, because that is something I couldn't vocalize as beautifully, but I think it holds merit. And I tried to say that earlier in the season watching Hard Knocks. I think he's a nerd. I think that's what Mike McDaniels is he is, and it's comical to say, but he is a nerd who is really smart about football. That's what the conclusion I've come to is. He is a smart guy when it comes to football, but I think, kind of meshing together what you both said, he doesn't have that leadership quality to get everybody to buy in, which is not good. And then the other thing that he's not good at is he's not able to pivot in game time decisions and make the pivots needed in order for his team to succeed. So he goes in with a game plan, and if that game plan works, the Dolphins do very well. But I think for him, if the game plan that he has come into that game with does not work, he doesn't know how to make any sort of pivots to try and still stay competitive. And I think really all season that has shown with the Dolphins, paired with Tua, of course.
Yeah, I think if you're a Dolphins fan, the only thing that pisses you off more about this game is the fact that it was on fucking Peacock, which I thought was the dumbest shit I've ever seen in my entire life. You have an NFL game that has to be subscription only through a streaming service. And I think this is just the only reason this pisses me off is I feel like this is the beginning of this happening more. And obviously they said, oh, it's 23 million people times however much they paid or didn't pay with the free trial. Or if you're like Yeti and I, you know how to stream it illegally. Like this is just
Allegedly.
Such a bullshit. Oh, no, I did it. This is such a bullshit thing to do. It's so fucking dumb. Like, I don't get why they wanted to push this. I hate all these streaming services. We're going backwards in time. When streaming first came out, it was cool because you're like, oh shit, like, yeah, I could just do this and like I got all this stuff. Now everybody has their streaming service, and now we're going to go backwards to a point where cable is going to be like, all right, let's bundle all these streaming services into channels that you can watch, and we'll call it cable. And everybody's going to be like, that's genius. And then this is all, we're just going backwards. It's annoying me because it's exactly what's going to happen is they're going to bundle NFL subscription packages now with all these streaming services. Now you have to buy an additional, and I just see it coming. and it's annoying as shit. And I wish more people streamed illegally to like totally boycott this. But here we are. Congratulations, NBC. You got your fucking game on Peacock. Amazing.
Yeah, our Leatherbrains Twitter account had tweeted that off and was just like, I wonder how much money people have made, like the Peacock has made for just this, because everybody's going to subscribe if their free trial's over, they're fucked. But then after that, some people are going to forget to subscribe and pay a couple months, and it just turns into a sink, and it's just like, it's a disgusting clear money grab that is frustrating. I agree with you, and I am somebody who did subscribe so I could watch the damn game, and they did it right. Like, they went and grabbed the Chiefs so everybody would watch them because it's the damn Chiefs. They got the Taylor Swift fans because Taylor Swift is at the game. Like, it was a perfect pairing for, hey, we're gonna make a shit ton of money if we just buy this game. And I'm with you. I agree.
Well, they're trying to compete with like Netflix, and everybody has Netflix, and everyone's had Netflix. So how do you compete with them? Well,
you don't.
You bend
over and you take it because you're not Netflix. You're Peacock.
Yeah, the difference is Netflix has a bunch of content and good content, whereas Peacock, all they have is a live game once a week. That's it.
Yeah,
they don't have shit on Peacock.
Fuck Peacock.
Have you looked through the library?
They do have Parks and Rec. Big Parks and Rec fan. I do like Parks and Rec. But other than that,
that's another money grab that they did, though. They went and picked up all the really popular sitcoms, The Office and Parks and Rec, and they're like, oh, these were popular and in their prime. Let's just only have them on Peacock.
Yeah, because people will buy it, so they can go watch it.
Yeah, it's so fucking dumb.
Speaking of buying, who bought in that the Green Bay Packers were going to be Dallas? 48-32.
One of us can raise our hands.
There's one of us here that had the foresight, the brains, the genius, the wherewithal to stand in front of America and say, Green Bay is going to beat Dallas.
And he's very humble, if you can't tell.
Oh, it's me.
I'd say
my bad.
That's
me. I'm reading off a teleprompter. I will read whatever's in front of me. So I was that's totally my fault. Yeah, it was me. I like to give you guys shit. And I think it was I think rewarding to be able to be like they match up well. And I think it was just the fact that Green Bay plays a style that is punch you in the mouth. They'll hit you deep. And I don't think Dallas wanted any part of that. And I was more banking on the fact that Dallas was just going to come in super nervous. And that's how they've always come out in the playoffs the last however many years that Dak's been there, is they just seem super nervous for whatever reason, whether it's Dak. Right away, you could see Dak throwing to CD. It was just all off. You got Love, perfect passer ratings. Like, this game, I didn't see that happening, but I did think that Green Bay was going to have a good enough day in the trenches to just wear down, beat up, and kind of make it a game. But I didn't see them running away as much as they did. But this was, if you're a Dallas fan, I feel really sorry for you. There's that clip of all the Dallas fans running in through the front doors as soon as they opened because they have all that standing room. God, could you imagine like standing out in the cold? It was cold for Texas because I think it was like 30 degrees or something. I forget how cold it was there, but I'm sure it was very cold for Texas people. Standing outside, freezing your ass off, and then going on like a dead sprint to a spot to just stand, and then like 20 minutes later, you're like, well, that's it for me. I'm done watching this. I'm just going to turn around and sprint back out.
See,
I feel no sadness.
Yeah, you describe sorrow for them, but I think it's quite hilarious, and I know Hunter's in the same boat with me. So, not to take anything away from Alan, because he is the only one that picked Green Bay to win. Yeti, you weren't on that episode, so maybe you secretly had them as well. But I do just want to run through a few stats from Dallas. All Cowboys fans, cover your earmuffs for this one, because you're not going to want to hear it. But just things that the rest of us can find humorous. Dallas is 5-6 as a playoff favorite since 1996, which means they have a losing record as a favorite in the playoffs since 1996. Dak is 2-5 in the playoffs, which is tied for the worst record in playoff history. This is their third straight loss as a playoff favorite, and they are the first team since the merger to accomplish that. So that's great. This is their 8th one and done since 1996. Now that the Lions have won, that means this is the second most in that span. The Colts are the only one with more. And then Dak has thrown 10 interceptions against the Packers alone, which is more than any other opponent, including all of the opponents in his own division. So the Packers definitely have Dak's number. So just things that go to show that we probably should have taken the Packers in this one. I don't know why we didn't do that.
Yeah, and I know Dak is getting a lot of the blame, but I think we need to look at Dallas's defense too, because this is one of the defenses that we looked at as saying, oh, they're a top 10 defense. But if you look back at their history, the Cardinals kind of gave teams the blueprint on how to beat the Cowboys. You run the ball on the Cowboys. You run it down their throat. You get a lead, and you get to a point where Dallas, they can't get their pass rushers after you because that's what their defense is made on. Or, yeah, they're made on Micah Parsons getting after the quarterback. But if you have the lead, you're not chucking the ball as much. They can't get to you on 3rd and long as often. And so they're leaving their secondary behind, in these games, right? Buffalo kind of showed us this blueprint too in week 14. But something I thought that was interesting was in Dallas's wins this year, they only allowed 87.6 yards on the ground per game. And their losses, it was doubled at 166 yards per game on the ground, which is insane. And you saw that very clearly with Aaron Jones and Green Bay this past weekend. They wanted to run the ball, and they did effectively. Do you guys have anything else on the Dallas defense that you want to talk about before we talk about Green Bay?
Yeah, I think depending on how you feel about Dan Orlovsky, he's hit or miss sometimes on some of these big talking shows. But one of the things that he was pretty adamant about before this game even played was that the Dallas defense does not do well with motion. They don't do well with guys shifting over the place. They don't do well, which if you go to who was, the only team to beat Dallas, or we look at Miami beating Dallas recently, what do they do a lot of? They just had a lot of motion. And he said that, and I was like, okay, that's interesting. And if you look at the game plan from what LaFleur had, which just genius, that's all he did. He was just moving people around on offense. He was getting them out of position. You saw wide open tight ends, wide open wide receivers. That's not just because Dallas necessarily fell down or they tripped, whatever, they tripped on themselves. It was really all by design. And I think kudos to LaFleur for seeing that. And, almost for the Dallas coordinators, they didn't look like they adjusted anything for the playoffs. It's the fucking playoffs. You got to do something different. They have 18 weeks of what you did to look at before the game. They're going to figure it out. That's the thing with NFL. They will figure it out. And if you don't do something different, if you don't adjust, this is what you're going to get. That's why you get a Dak pick six. That's why you get the defense getting gashed. That's why they're out of position. They can see it. And they didn't adjust anything. So I think as much as it is on the players, I think the coaches did nothing to help these guys get in position to win this game.
Yeah, I do just want to say one more thing to maybe ease the burden on Cowboys fans a little bit. Not so much, though. But this game, as bad as it was, could have been even worse for you because with 10 minutes remaining in this game, Dallas was down by 32 points. That deficit would have tied the largest of any playoff loss in NFL history. So if Green Bay wouldn't have pulled their starters, they would have kept the foot on the gas. This not only would have been another bad playoff loss for you, but it would have been an even more historic loss. So they managed to rally enough to avoid that, at least.
Well, and you mentioned that they pulled their starters. That in and of itself in a playoff game is embarrassing. I mean, that it is. If you're going to pull your starters out of the game in a playoff game, should you be in the playoff game? I mean, that's kind of that's where I go from a mental standpoint. Jordan Love looked absolutely fantastic. He went 16 for 21 for 272 and 3 touchdowns. But really the storyline here is Dak Prescott. I mean, let's be honest. Dak Prescott threw 2 interceptions, one of which being a pick six, one of which became a touchdown, not short thereafter he threw the interception. That's 14 points. It's on Dak. That is 14 points. So let's just say for hypothetical conversation here, we take off 14 points off this score. So the overall score was 48-32. Packers win. You take away 14 points of these Packers that Dak graciously handed them. The score now becomes 34-32. I get what you're saying, Scotty, and that at the 10 minutes left in the game, they were down by a large margin, and Dak did end up putting his big boy pants on and trying to get them as close as they could. But at the end of the day, that's Dak Prescott's fault. And we can share the blame with Mike McCarthy. We can share the blame with the coaching staff. But at the end of the day, Dak Prescott has not been able to succeed with the Cowboys. He gets them in winning positions. They go 12-5, they make it to the playoffs, and then they bust. That is what Dak Prescott historically has been for this team and this organization. And I don't know where the Cowboys go to try and right themselves. I don't know if Dak Prescott's the answer.
This is Dak's MO. Even years prior, he's a great backdoor stat cover. And you fast forward to next year, and somebody's going to bring up this game, and they're going to be like, he threw for 400 yards and 3 touchdowns, and that couldn't be his fault. And it's like he did this. He's done this his entire career, where he'll just backdoor his way into a really nice stat line. You're like, that's pretty good. He's a pretty good guy. And we know football doesn't happen in a vacuum. All these things stack on top of each other. In Slaps, you're absolutely right. Like his inability to like steady the ship while it was obviously like starting to retain water, like they had multiple opportunities to right wrongs. And if you know your defense is leaky, like offense coordinator, let's drop some more run plays. Let's control the ball a little bit. Give our defense time to figure it out. You play complementary football, and the teams that are at the top do that. The teams that stay up at the top do that, and the teams that don't find themselves in these holes or weird predicaments. You're like, well, I haven't seen that all year, and it's like, yeah, because they found you out. They found your tendencies, and now you don't know what to do to right that ship. And if Dak Prescott is going to be the leader of this organization, if you go back and look at the top quarterbacks throughout NFL history, like they take it into their own hands. They're like, yeah, this doesn't look right. I'm going to do this. I'm not going to do that. Like they're sitting on this. They're not sitting on that. And like they were just sitting on everything he was doing, and he just didn't know how to adjust. He was just sitting there like just a complete victim to the whole situation.
He was a jack.
And then at the end, he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna throw some. We'll get some yards." And it's like, dude, nobody gives a fuck. We're already watching. Like, I'm already trying to figure out like what Peacock does, and like nobody's watching it anymore.
Well, and I love dogpiling on the Cowboys as much as anybody, but we do have to give Jordan Love his due. We mentioned it that he had a great game. This was my Packers stat of the game here. Jordan Love finished the game with just 1.1 points short of a perfect quarterback rating, which he actually had for the vast majority of the game. They pulled him out. Everyone said, oh, he had this perfect passer rating. Then they ended up putting the starters back in after the Cowboys drove 91 yards to narrow the score a little bit. And in that time, Jordan Love threw one pass, and that one pass went incomplete, which cost him the perfect passer rating. Had he maintained it, he would have been the first quarterback in Super Bowl era history to have a perfect passer rating in the playoffs. So needless to say, Jordan Love is the man. If you're a Packers fan, you got to be ecstatic about how he has improved over the course of the season as a starter. He's impressive. He's fun to watch.
I thought you were going to say, needless to say, Jordan Love gave Matt LaFleur a black eye at the end of this game for screwing up his record there.
I don't even know if anyone realized it while the game was happening. And obviously, they're much more concerned about winning the game than any of those stats.
And one thing about the Green Bay offense is they don't have a pass catcher that's over the age of 25 years old. Their oldest wide receiver is Christian Watson, and he's 24 years old on a rookie contract still. Mm-hmm. So that wide receiver room and tight end room is only going to get better with Jordan Love, who's 25 years old still. That's a scary thought.
Well, and the interesting thing then becomes, and I know we need to move on to this Lions-Rams game here, but to conclude that, do they get I'm going to ask you guys this question, and I think it's probably time to move on. Do they get a discount with Jordan Love as a quarterback because he has not played as long and shown himself as long, given somebody like Joe Burrow, who was drafted at the same time and garnered a huge contract? Packers get any discount here because this is really Jordan Love's first year? Or are they going to have to pay a premium to try and keep him around?
If he has a good agent, he should get paid, but I don't know how good his agent is.
Yeah, if I saw Daniel Jones get $40 million a year, I'm saying I want $50 million a year.
Yeah,
true.
That's fair.
Daniel Jones fucked it up for everybody.
He really did. All right, let's go over to this Lions-Rams game. As a pseudo-Lions fan, I will take the reins here. Lions win this game in 24-23. I had this game circled as the game I was most excited for. There's a lot of history here with both the quarterbacks. There was a lot of narrative going into this game. I really thought the Rams were going to win this game, but I'm happy that the Lions won, and more than anything else, I'm really happy that this just was a good game. This is what I had thought this was going to come to. I really did think this was going to be anybody's game, and I think Vegas even agreed with me there. I think the spread was pretty narrow. So it came down to the wire. The Lions won this game. The Lions, when they are clicking, they're clicking, man. And I know that we're going to kind of get into the weeds of it and talk about Dan Campbell, so I will let you guys do all that talking, but I've just got to say this. The Rams are a team that nobody wants to face. I know they're in my division. They're in my conference. I don't like when we have to play them because I have a lot of admiration for Sean McVay and what that team has done there. Puka Nacua has looked incredible this entire season and broke even more records in this game as a rookie. And I really did think that the Rams are going to bring this one home, but I'm really happy for the Lions. Let's keep rolling. Let's keep biting the kneecaps, and let's see what happens again next week.
Yeah. I think I know before we went live, I talked and wanted to talk to Scotty about Dan Campbell. I didn't have anything super specific, but if you look at this game, this is exactly what we said weeks leading up to the playoffs, was that nobody wants to play the Rams. Nobody wants to play the Rams. Nobody wants to play the Rams. And if you look, if I told you before the game that Matt Stafford's going to throw for 367, 2 touchdowns, Nakua's going to have 181 and a touchdown, you're going to be like, no turnovers for the Rams. You're like, damn, that does not look good for the Lions. And I thought this was a beautifully coached game from Dan Campbell, and the fact that he kept his team together. Listen, they were outgained in every facet except for rushing, which was just barely. The Rams were averaging 7.7 yards per play. Like I said, there were no turnovers, minimal penalties. It was a clean game. It was just who wants it more all game. And this was one of those staple Dan Campbell games. And yeah, he's not going to X's and O you, but who did they have to play on the other side? The guy that is going to X and O you to death and is going to scheme and match up to death. And I thought it was I thought it was great for the city of Detroit. I thought it was great for Dan Campbell. I think it legitimizes a lot of things that he was doing, because if you look at a lot of the broadcasts, everybody's picking the Rams. I know we were very leery about how this Lions team was going to show up. And you know what? They could have easily lost this game, but it was just kind of like, that's how it happens in the playoffs. And they stuck together and they did what they did. No, it wasn't pretty from an efficiency standpoint, but it got the job done.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you. I mean, this was a great coach game by Dan Campbell, no doubt about it. And my problem with Dan Campbell isn't when he coaches games well; it's when he blows games because he's not coaching them well, and that's happened several times this season. But this was, I agree with you, 100%, a well played game, a great coach game. I think the Lions earned this, and. It goes back to what we said. We talked a couple weeks ago. Are the Lions a legitimate Super Bowl contender? And I had said then, and I still believe now, that the way the league is shaken up, absolutely. I mean, anybody is at this point in time. And if the Lions are going to give that product on the field in every game, arguably this is one of the most competitive matchups they're going to have in the playoffs. The Rams are no joke. That offense is no joke. And so I think they're in it just as much as anybody. And if they're going to show up and perform like that, hell yeah. I mean, they're in it as much as any other team in the league.
And as somebody who has been a Dan Campbell supporter this entire season, I was even in the camp, and I said this in our group chat. I said, my biggest concern is that Dan Campbell makes one of those questionable calls that he has notoriously done throughout the season, and the Lions lose the game because of it. He didn't, and they won, and I think it's because you didn't see nearly as much tomfoolery in that category of, a fake punt on your own 40-yard line, and just like the ancillary weird shit that Dan Campbell has done. I love it in the regular season because it just adds spice and flair to the entirety of the story and the narrative and the game itself. You're in the playoffs now. Let's act like a big boy and let's make the smart, right decisions in order to let your team succeed, and I think Dan Campbell really did in this one.
And while I think Dan Campbell, he take it, Scotty.
Well, I was just going to say, before Yeti went, one of the things that was impressive about this game, and the reason why Dan Campbell didn't have to make those questionable calls, is because the Lions offense was rolling. They were unstoppable. In the entire first half, they only saw 4 third downs. And in that time, they scored 21 points. So they were absolutely rolling to start this game off. That alleviates so much of the pressure. Even though it's a tight game, it alleviates so much of the pressure from the coaching staff where they say, hey, look what we did in the first 2 quarters. We don't have to make stupid decisions. We don't have to take unnecessary risks. Our offense can move the ball, and they proved that right away.
And we have to give a lot of credit to the defensive coordinator, too, in Detroit, because they gave up over 400 passing yards, or not passing yards, but 400 total yards. But they didn't give up a touchdown in the red zone. Their red zone defense really stepped up. They didn't allow a single touchdown on 3 attempts. Sean McVay had to settle for 3 field goals in that time, which that was really the difference in that game. Because if they get a touchdown on one of those 3 attempts, we're looking at a different result, hypothetically, right? And I think the defensive coordinator deserves a lot of kudos. Scotty, you go ahead.
Yeah, well, and I just have my stat of the game here coincides perfectly with that, because we were, just like everybody else, looking at this Lions defense and saying, okay, these guys are a liability. And, the Lions are going to lose games because their defense can't seem to stop anybody. But if you delve a little bit deeper into the stats, what I thought was interesting and surprising before this game is that the Lions defense was actually the number 1 rush defense when adjusted for the league average. So DVOA, the Lions rush defense is no joke. And they demonstrated that in this game where they held Kyron Williams, who was the talk of the town for the entire season, to 61 yards and no touchdowns. That's over 30 yards fewer than his game-by-game average, and he only played 12 games, he scored 12 touchdowns. He averaged a touchdown per game, and they held him in check. That defensive front is a big reason why the Lions walked away as a winner.
Aiden Hutchinson, man, he's the real deal.
Yeah, and one last thing about the Rams, and then we can move on to our next segment here. Do you guys think we saw an official passing of the torch between Puka and Cooper Kupp? Cooper Kupp, he didn't have the game we're used to seeing from him in clutch games. He had 5 catches for 27 yards. Puka, 9 catches, 181 yards, and a touchdown. Is this the official goodbye Cooper Kupp, or what are we thinking here?
I think it is. I think we've seen it all year. Where has Cooper Kupp been all season? Where has the Cooper Kupp that we have known been all season? He's come back from injury, and there's a new sheriff in town, and that person is Puka Nacua. And it has shown. This game was a great indication that is the case. It was funny. The announcers of this game were even talking about how Puka he's joining Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp for their breakfast talks. And, we joked about that last season about what are they talking about at breakfast and everything, and how they've allowed Puka Nacua to come to breakfast with them. It's shown. It's shown with this rookie, like he is buying into this. And I think it's a really good indication of not even just Sean McVay, but Matthew Stafford and his ability to be that leader and that teacher and mentor for his wide receivers. And he did it with Cooper Kupp, and he's now doing it with Puka Nacua. I think we have officially seen the torch pass, and I think Cooper Kupp's best days are a little bit behind him.
I think if you're a Rams fan and you like McVay and Stafford together, I think you can thank Puka for keeping them around, because I think if he wouldn't have emerged as like a good threat, if they would have missed on the draft, if Kupp's getting hurt, Stafford's, I think it changes how you look at the end of the season. Obviously, I don't think they get to the spot they are without him, and I think it might have reinvigorated. And McVay said as much. He's like, "Hey, thanks this team for finding myself, this year," or whatever he said. It's like, I honestly think Puka is keeping them in the league again, which is crazy to say. So I would agree with you. I think it's more Puka than it is Cooper now, and I think Kupp may be more just lingering injury related. It's tough to get off that train once you're on it.
And in fairness to Cooper Kupp, obviously we know he's extremely talented, and he's not just competing with any other wide receiver here. Puka Nacua has exploded onto the scene. We already know that he broke the rookie receiving record in the NFL this year with 1,486. In this game, he broke the rookie post-game receiving record with 181 yards. He stole that from Rashee Rice, who held it for about 24 hours. And he also has the record for most receptions in a single game for a rookie with 15. So this guy is very clearly one of the best we've ever seen in his first year. Cooper Kupp, I'm sure he's glad to have Puka there, but it's not like he's competing with any Joe Schmo off the street here for targets.
That's fair to say. All right, let's go over to Monday Night Preview/Review. So the Bills game has just concluded against the Steelers. Alan, do you have the final score? I do not have that game.
31-17.
31-17 Bills. We stopped
Steelers.
watching.
Yeah, Steelers made it close. It was 24-17. Steelers punched a touchdown, and it looked like could have been a little bit more back and forth. Josh Allen takes him down the field for a go-ahead touchdown, and then the Eagles failed to convert on 4th down, and that was that.
Do we know what did Josh Allen throw any picks in this game?
No turnovers as far as I know.
Scotty's
key to
upset
win.
about this.
I'm not upset. I mean, it sucks.
He threw for 203 yards and 3 touchdowns. One of those touchdowns was on an extremely short field, so just super efficient in that regard. And then he rushed for a lot. I think he had like 60 yards rushing and a touchdown as well. So Josh Allen accounted for four touchdowns on the day.
A touchdown rush that he had was the longest of his career, and it was electric.
It was baller. Yeah,
You
I was
don't
streaming
see
because I had money on it, so I was pretty happy myself.
He gave like a little hezzy that looked like he was going to slide.
Yeah.
And I think that froze everybody because they're like, oh, he's going down and can't hit him. And that's like, well, as soon as you do that, it's over. Mahomes does that all the time, too. I'm sure it drives everybody nuts.
And you saw his speed at the back end of that. People forget how effing gigantic Josh Allen is. Like, people have compared him to Ben Roethlisberger, and obviously he's the body of young Ben Roethlisberger before he put on some pounds. But he has the speed of an elite runner, and you saw him outrun defensive backs from a standing start. Like, that's
I
tough
think
to deal
Ben
with.
Roethlisberger has only been that fast in like a car. I don't think he's ever been that fast in his entire life.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a lot to discuss in this game. Like I said, we turned it off at halftime to come do the show instead because it was such a bleh. Steelers probably didn't belong in the playoffs, and I think this game was kind of indicative of that. So let's talk about the game tonight. We have the Eagles versus the Bucks here at 7:15 Central. So it's right around the corner. Obviously, if you're listening tomorrow on your podcast platform, you know what's happened, but it has not happened for us
No spoilers,
yet.
please.
We all have the Eagles here except Scotty, who's taking the Bucks. Scotty, why are you taking the Bucks over the Eagles?
The only reason is because for 5 weeks in a row, I have said the Eagles will find a way, they'll put it together, and they just never have. They've disappointed me for 5 straight weeks because obviously we know the potential. We know the talent on this team, and they just seem to have completely forgotten their identity toward the end of the season. And the other big thing is when the Eagles were winning these close games at the beginning of the year, they were winning it with A.J. Brown getting over 100 yards receiving, averaging over 100 yards receiving. They started losing games once A.J. Brown started dropping into the 50 yards and 60 yards per game. Well, guess what? A.J. Brown's not going to be on the field at all. And so I think that is going to fundamentally change the way this offense runs. I will say, and we talked about this a little before the show, the forecast is projecting some rain. And if the Bucks are going to win this game, they have to get their pass catchers involved. And if it's a torrential downpour, that could change the math a little bit. But ultimately, I just think I hope the Eagles win. I want them to win this game. But they just haven't given me enough confidence to say that they're going to win. And Baker Mayfield, the last couple games aside, has really found a way to put that offense together and has the potential to put up a lot of points.
Okay, Eagles are 5-6 when favored by 3 or more points, and tonight they are favored by 3 points. So let's see if they become an even 50%, go 6-6 here. The rest of us have the Eagles. I don't know if we really need to go into details. I just wanted to hear why Scotty had the Bucks, because I think most people probably do have the Eagles here. Let's move over into the divisional round. We have a couple questions here by some people, so we will answer those here at the end of the show, but let's give a sneak peek. We'll just kind of have a brief discussion about this divisional round upcoming next week and the sneak peek that entails. So Packers at 49ers, San Francisco, they are minus 10-point favorites. I think we've all got the 49ers here. It looks like I have not put mine in, but I do also have the 49ers. It's a no-brainer. 49ers, I think, are going to win the Super Bowl. I've said that repeatedly, and it looks like their first opponent is going to be the Packers. So I wish the Packers best of luck. I like Jordan Love, but 49ers
I think they got to get on Love early. I think if he gets any confidence in that game and they don't get to him and rattle him a little bit, get him off his spots a little bit more, I think it's going to be close. I think it's going to be a much closer game. I actually like the Packers covering that 10. If that's the spread, I would hammer the Packers on that because I think it's going to go into the fourth quarter. I think Love is going to. He obviously had his coming out party. I think this cements it against this team. I think he really keeps him in the game to the very end. But 49ers.
Just an interesting question. If your franchise quarterback suddenly vanished off the face of the earth, and you had to choose between Brock Purdy and Jordan Love, both of them have seen success now. Who are you picking?
Jordan Love.
I mean, I'm going to take Love.
I'm going to take Love as well, for sure. Okay, Eagles, Bucks, whoever wins tonight will play the Lions. Now, if the Lions play the Eagles, the Lions are 2.5-point favorites. Is that right?
Yep.
Wow, that's interesting. And if the Eagles win tonight, then they would play for 6.5-point favorites. I butchered this whole thing. It's kind of hard to read.
It's okay.
Because there's a lot.
The Lions would be favored by 2.5 over the Eagles. The Lions would be favored over 6.5 versus Tampa Bay.
Thank you. Looks like I have not given my thoughts and opinions on this game, so I will do it now. Scotty, you've got the Lions. The rest of you guys have the Eagles, assuming that the Eagles do beat the Bucks. But if the Bucks play the Lions, then Allen has the Lions. I'm going to take the Lions. I'm going to roll with you, Scotty. Let's do this thing. I made the mistake last week of saying that Sean McVay was going to come in and beat the Lions. I'm done with that. I'm going to roll with the team that I have been a pseudo supporter of this season. Let's go all the way to the championship. I do think the Eagles are somewhat fraudulent, and they have struggled with health on both sides of the ball this year, as well as they just have not looked like the same offense or defense with losing their OC and their DC. So I'm going to take the Lions here. I think it's going to be Eagles-Lions, and I do think the Lions are going to win this game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think my take, I said the Lions probably no matter what, and that's barring the Eagles coming out and looking like what we know the Eagles can be. Because if the Eagles come out and even if they win, even if they struggle in the slightest against the Bucks, I'm going to take the Lions because I do think that the Lions' top end performance is better than both of these teams. But with that said, Philly comes out and they start looking good and they beat down the Bucs like they should. That could change things for me. But as of right now, I think it's the Lions.
Okay. You guys are taking the Eagles. Let's go to the Houston Ravens game. All three of you have the Ravens, and the Ravens are 8.5-point favorites. I am also going to take the Ravens here. I think Houston's defense still has some learning to do, and I think the Ravens are going to teach them how they're going to run their offense, and
I agree.
They're going to destroy them. So
we'll see if. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say I think that this offensively it could be kind of a fun game, but I think the Ravens' defense is going to be the determining factor for me in this game.
Yeah, I was just going to put a backdrop on this. What a neat playoff we have where we have two new young quarterbacks that are coming in and dealing, and we're like, okay, now wait a second. Like, you have Love stepping into the Niners game at San Francisco, and we're like, well, Love's the better quarterback. We'll see what happens. And then you have this game where you're like, obviously it's Lamar's the better quarterback, but I think the AFC nailed their divisional rounds now with having the Chiefs at the Bills and now having the Texans at the Ravens. I think it's just going to be good matchups all the way around. It's going to be fun to watch.
For all the chaos all season, it worked out okay for us fans.
And I actually think I'm going to take the Texans spread here. I like the
8.5.
Yeah, 8.5.
I like 8.5.
Yeah,
I think if they can
teams
control the line of scrimmage and get Devin Singletary going and not put as much pressure on Stroud, I think this could be a good game for Houston.
I think so too. I think the team, like the one seed getting the rest, there's always just like a sluggish start, and that kind of lends itself to the team maybe taking an early lead and then having to claw back and win it. So I wouldn't be surprised if that plays out here with the Texans take a halftime lead.
Sure. Bills Chiefs. The Bills are 2.5-point favorites, so not a great spread there, but I have the Bills and Alan has the Bills. Yeti and Scotty have the Chiefs. However, Scotty put ride or die, and he's scared either way. Yeti, as somebody who's not a Chiefs fan, what makes you take the Chiefs over the Bills here?
Yeah, man. I think my one concern with the Chiefs going into the postseason was their offense, right? And we saw the Chiefs on Saturday night just put on an offensive clinic, and I think they stuck to their game plan to a T. And that was to get Isaiah Pacheco the rock early and often. In fact, he ran the ball 24 times, which I think Kansas City and Andy Reid have gone away from way too many times this postseason or even throughout his career. And getting Pacheco going early and often set up so many passing lanes for Mahomes, and you don't need much for Mahomes because he's the greatest of all time. And I think you're starting to see Rashee Rice emerge as a true wide receiver, and Travis Kelce even had 10 targets. And I mean, I think that offense is finally clicking. I know that defense is going to hold Josh Allen in check, and I think it's going to be a good game no matter what. It's going to be a one possession type game, but I prefer the experience in this situation, and that rides with Mahomes.
Well, I will be at Disney. I'll actually be at Epcot during this game. And so God knows what I'm going to be doing, but I won't be watching it. I'm not going to take away from family time. I'm actually going to turn off my phone, and I'm not going to turn it back on until the game's over. I'm going to totally go that route. Self-discipline. It's called
you make some crazy choices in the
That's
postseason.
poor life. No. See, here's the thing. That is someone who has been so gifted with the recent playoff just runs of the Chiefs that he doesn't have to worry about it. And he's like, you had plenty.
Listen,
fuck it.
5-6 weeks ago, Slap sat here and said divisional rounds the Chiefs ceiling. So either way, the Chiefs met what they were supposed to do this year with this roster. So I'm good with it. Anything more than this is icing on the cake. So I'm cool. I do think the Bills win, and I think the reason is the Chiefs have just struggled so much in the red zone. And I think if the Chiefs take that into Buffalo, I think that's the recipe for disaster. But you never know. Josh Allen starts gifting free a couple extra possessions.
That's what it comes down to for me is Josh Allen's going to have 100%. To minimize the mistakes and not give over those gifts in this game, because if he does, I think that's where the slope gets slippery.
And this Kansas City defense is no joke. I mean, it'd be one thing if he was playing the defense from last season, but this is a completely different defensive unit in terms of their ability to get stuff done on the field. Josh Allen has that propensity to turn the ball over, and if he does not take care of the ball, I think the Chiefs are going to walk away with this. But if Josh Allen plays like he played today, we could have a totally different story. It'll be a good game, kind of a coin flip game.
All right, we got a couple questions. Let's get those, and then we will get the hell out of here.
Here's the mail, it never fails. It makes me want to wag my tail. When it comes, I want to wail.
First question comes from Katie Kent. She was in 9 leagues this season. She got 4 wins in 3 second place. That is a lot of leagues, but I'm going to tell you what, we appreciate you as a supporter here at Leatherbrains, and I know that we've helped you get so many of those wins, so you're welcome. The question is, so she used NFL Fantasy and ESPN apps with traditional rules, but she's heard about other apps like Sleeper and other types of gameplay, 2 quarterbacks, Superflex, etc. She doesn't really understand what the Superflex is and would just like a little bit more kind of a rundown from a fantasy football perspective of what these are. So Sleeper is the app that I use for all of my fantasy football stuff. I love it. I was an early adopter of it, but there's some features in that app. The UI is really great, and I love the group chat feature. It just kind of puts everybody in the league in a chat. They have, whenever a trade goes down, everything's all in that chat. I love it. I think everybody should play on Sleeper. I think it's the best app for fantasy football. But as far as the different league types, you got Superflex, which means you can start 2 quarterbacks. You don't have to, but it probably is a good idea because your quarterbacks are where the points are at. There are Dynasty fantasy football leagues, which is you keep your players year over year. That one gets kind of fun if you get to be a real true degen of the NFL like we are. We are in a Dynasty league as well as our redraft leagues, which it sounds like you played in this season. So hope that answers your question. And if any of you guys want to jump in or give any other thoughts on that, please feel free.
Yeah, I think you got it. I think it's just different ways to score points. You add players, you get to score more points. You have more options for your roster. I think it's all fun. 9 leagues is a lot, though.
That
Katie.
is a lot.
That's a lot. That's a lot for my brain. And if I don't have the app in front of me, I'm just watching games, and I think you would just celebrate everything that happens at that point because I'm assuming it all helps
it's
you.
It's the exact
so
opposite.
No, you hate everything because
You
you're always
hate
going.
everything.
You have a player, and then you're going against him. It's terrible.
Yeah.
I don't know how
no
you
matter
do it.
what.
Everything.
I was in 9 leagues this year as well, and I will not be doing that again because of that reason. It takes away from the football experience because you're watching, like, part of the fun of fantasy is being able to watch a game and celebrate when your players do well. But when you got players on every single team and players going against you on every single team, it like numbs you to the effects of fantasy football. So I definitely do not recommend being in that many leagues. It made it less fun.
Have you seen that video? Is that guy that it's like a tongue-in-cheek, it's like a short or whatever, but he's like watching football and he's celebrating everything that's going on. It's like, oh yeah, I have that guy. And it's like random no-name guys, but he's just celebrating because he's in so many leagues. It's like, that was Matt. He's just like anybody doing it. He's like, Mason Rudolph, fuck yeah. Woo!
Well, it also is because you have so many leagues, it's impossible to remember all of your rosters. So it's like, wait, do I have that guy? I don't know if I'm starting him. What do I do? And you just are confused and numb the whole time.
Well, yeah, and you might have Christian McCaffrey in 3 leagues, and then in 4 leagues you're going against him, and you're like, shit. So you kind of got to pick which league you care about more than the other ones to root for. But I was in 7 leagues last season. I was like, I got to tone it back a little bit because even then it was a lot to juggle.
You know what, Katie? What I can tell you is that thank God you're not in leagues way back when. I remember my dad being in fantasy leagues, and I had to watch the bottom line of ESPN to check what the guys got. And then we had to write down what the point total was. And then when the paper came out the next day, we had to look for stat corrections because ESPN wouldn't always have it right. So you did stat corrections the next morning with the Monday paper. The Monday morning paper is how you actually figured out, and then you jotted it all down to figure out your point total. So just thank God you're not playing it like that anymore.
Dude, that'd make a commissioner's life hell because you have to almost fact check people to make sure.
Well, it was you scored your own, and the guy you were playing with basically checked you and said, "Yeah, that's right, that's your point total," and then you just said if you won or lost.
Kind of like golf.
Wow. Yeah, it was like gentlemen's. It was a gentleman's game.
Next question comes from What's Up Podcast. Apologies if you guys spoke about this already, but who's your coach of the year? We actually did cover this on a episode a couple weeks ago. We were kind of talking about this. If you really want the analysis, I would go back and listen to it, but I will just say mine is D'Amico Ryans. I think he deserves it, and he very clearly has exceeded expectations, so that's mine.
I agree.
Same.
Okay, cool. I guess we're all in on. I was not expecting that. We are all in on D'Amico Ryans. Last question comes from Abel Johnson. CJ Stroud MVP. I personally think he should get it. What do you guys think?
If he wins a Super Bowl,
well,
he's not good.
He'll be the Super Bowl MVP.
I think this should be I think this should be one of the first years or a year where a quarterback doesn't get it. That's my opinion. I don't think any of the quarterbacks deserve it. I think it should go to Christian McCaffrey because I think he was clearly the best player in the
I think
NFL.
Tyreek Hill would garner some argument too, because I think if you took Tyreek off that team, it would look a lot worse as well.
Yeah. They
But
traditionally give
I
it
like
to
CMC.
the best player on the 1 seed. I think if they're going to give it to somebody this year, I think CMC should definitely get it. I think this is the year he should get it, but who knows? They'll probably just give it to Lamar because that's what the NBC
I still
is
think
now.
Patrick Mahomes should be a candidate for it, because I think if you took Patrick Mahomes and you put Jared Goff in this situation, this team looks terrible. So like that goes to show how much Patrick Mahomes is important for the Chiefs. But I think there's an argument for that every year. I think so.
I think in the postseason now, looking with the entire regular season in the rearview mirror, CMC has got to be the favorite. He's got to be up there.
Yeah, he won't win.
And
He'll win.
Hopefully that answers your question.
There we go.
All right, cool. Hey, all you Brainiacs out there, really do appreciate you guys' viewership, your questions, your guys' interactions over on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. We are all over the place, and I greatly appreciate your guys' support. It does truly mean the world. Hit subscribe, man. Hit the subscribe button, and we do appreciate it, because we are a growing small podcast and show that is getting bigger every day, but that's because of you guys, and we are not lost on that, and we do appreciate it. So there's a bunch of pointing going on down on the screen. I'm trying to look into the camera.
Your
not at you
professionalism
guys.
was astounding
you're
through
good.
that.
Thank you, because I just saw it on my peripherals. There was just so much pointing going on, and it really confused.
Everyone's
the hell
pointing
out
into
of me.
the camera like it differentiates any one four of us.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know what the hell's going on. I'm trying to look at the camera so people can see that I am. trying to
Yeti
be
kue who I was
sincere and
talking
clear.
to.
Okay.
Yeti knew who I was talking to.
Abel Johnson, we are over on Spotify, so go check us out there. Hit that subscribe button, and it mean the world, man, or woman. I guess I don't know what you are, but I would appreciate the support. It does really mean the world.
And one last shout out to Totem Pole Nation. He says, love the show, and the show loves you back, brother.
Amen. All right,
I
let's
love
get the
totem
hell
poles.
out of here. We'll do this again next Monday. We
R.
Out.
If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you tune into our new releases every week on your favorite podcast app. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and check out leatherbrains.com for all of your fantasy football needs. And remember, Brainiacs, a championship should be more than a fantasy.